What is it about Angela Merkel that contributed to her being one of the longest tenured and most popular Western leaders, working with 8 Italian ministers, 5 British prime ministers, 4 French presidents, and 4 American presidents, and yet still leaving office with an 80% approval rating? And what will her legacy to Germany be, to the EU, and to Western democracy? Like many of us, I have had a cursory understanding of a very private Angela Merkel, but a fantastic new biography, The Chancellor, by Kati Marton, coalesces the details, contextualizes her role, and presents a sweeping view of her tenure that is enlightening and thought-provoking about her legacy, the status of Western democracy, and the players on the world stage, and how, from the most unlikely of beginnings, she became the most powerful woman in the world, maybe the most powerful person in the world. Kati brings her award-winning journalistic skills, membership on the Council of Foreign Relations, and travels around the globe to take us on this extraordinary journey of this most humble of leaders. Kati, welcome to Just the Right Book.
Roxanne, I'm just delighted to be with you. As you know, my visits to your bookstore over the years have been an essential part of my writing life.
Oh, that's so sweet.
No, truly. And of course, Bookhampton is also my neighborhood bookstore, but
Yeah.
R.J. Julia holds a special place in my heart. And it was at R.J. Julia that I got word many years ago. I have to figure out how many, because that's where Simon and Schuster called me to say that Hidden Power was on the bestseller list.
Oh,
And
I remember that.
Yes. That is one of those moments in life that you just never forget. Wow, I'm on the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I associate R.J. Julia with wonderful events,
Yeah.
and the conversations with you are always the best.
Well-
So thank you so much for choosing The Chancellor.
Yeah.
And
Well, I'm in love. I'm not just in love with this book, as friends of mine would know. I'm obsessed with it.
Good.
And here's the thing that there's a lot of headline events that you go over that really reveal a lot of who she is, and we'll get to those. But I think her beginnings are so defining. She is the daughter of a kind of remote pastor.
Yes.
And as a sense of duty, he goes to East Germany, where Angela is raised. So share with us how that beginning was so defining to everything else.
Absolutely right. Yeah. No. So Roxanne, her father was, as you said, this very austere Lutheran pastor with a deep sense of the need to serve and responsibility to those who are less privileged, which really, as we will discuss, I'm sure, really is at the core of Angela Merkel's political life. But the fact that her father chose to go from the security of West Germany right into the jaws of the Soviet monster, if I can put it that way, and I can because I too grew up in a
you were
Soviet,
there in Hungary.
Yeah. So and if I can just insert that I think that my understanding of her journey was facilitated by the fact that we grew up under somewhat similar circumstances. I, as the child of political prisoners in Soviet-controlled Hungary, and she as a victim of the Stasi state for the first 35 years of her life. And that decision was made by her father, who said that he would have gone anywhere to preach the word of the Lord.
And voluntarily.
Oh, absolutely. There were very few West German ministers or pastors who were signing up for duty in Soviet-controlled East Germany, which was officially an atheist state. So it was A, dangerous, B, talk about a hardship post. So they went from Hamburg, which is where Angela was born, and which had been decimated by the Allied bombing, but was reviving very fast, to this remote hamlet in Brandenburg province, not far from the Polish border in East Germany. So it was an enormous sacrifice, and one that was thrust upon her. I mean, the child did not choose to be taken into essentially Soviet custody in a way. I mean, she referred to East Germany as a Lager, which is the German word for camp, concentration camp, and it was the ultimate surveillance state.
Well, and, speaking of it being a surveillance state, I certainly knew how formidable and wide the informant structure for the
Yes.
Stasi was. But when I was reading the book, and you come to understand the danger of standing out in any possible way, because the definition of what was in violation to your responsibility as a communist citizen was pretty damn wide.
And this is where she learned not to call attention to herself, which again served her so well in her political life, and we'll get to that. But yeah, it was dangerous to stand out. She always sat in the back of every class. At the same time, she was always the best in every class because she was brilliant. And that she could not disguise, but her affect, her appearance was about as drab as it could be, and some would say
served her well.
Yes, some would say that with minor alterations, and I'm sure we'll talk about how she has made some compromises in her appearance as a politician, as she had to.
We'll get to that.
Good. Okay.
So she's then trained as a chemist. She goes to a university,
the best university in the East Bloc, Leipzig University, and again her first exposure to just how far the Stasi penetrated individual lives was when she was nearly held back from graduating from high school for a kind of a childish prank. She sang the communist anthem, the Internationale, in English, the language of the enemy. And so they were not going to let her graduate, even though she had won a prestigious place in Leipzig University, and her father, the pastor, had to get to work and smooth things out for her, so she
could go.
But it was a sign that however careful she was, she could never slip up.
There was no room.
No.
There was absolutely.
It was a great training ground, actually, for a politician, a future politician, to be that cautious and that in control of her narrative.
So here's something that was hard for me to even grasp. She is a chemist, but incredibly brilliant, respected, briefly married to another chemist. And then what seems like illogical, she is slightly active in a political maybe more than slightly. You'll expand on that.
Yeah.
But then she becomes a minister in Helmut Kohl's cabinet.
Yes,
like, how did that even happen?
So, her ascent was absolutely meteoric. When the wall fell on that night in November 1989, she, being a creature of habit, she was sauna night, so Thursday she went to her sauna, but rather than doing her usual going to the pub after the sauna, she grabbed her towel and crossed into West Berlin for the first time. A few hours of just absolutely, dazed.
And not too far from the wall.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, she crossed where the opening in the wall. There was suddenly this breach in the wall, and people were just East Berliners were just pouring across, and couple of hours of just stunned perusal of West Berlin, which was already this shiny metropolis compared to the pitch black and unrehabilitated East, unrehabilitated from the bombings,
and economically disastrous.
the economy was teetering. But at any rate, so typically for Merkel, few hours of that was enough for her. It was like being in a foreign country. In fact,
she was kind of like a refugee in her own country.
She later, well, one of the people who really brought her to life for me was her very close friend from that period, a man named Michael Schindhelm, who opened up about what she was really like in those days. And he said that we were refugees, because to be a refugee means that you give up everything that is familiar to you, your friends, your habits, your favorite rock groups, movies, what have you. And we, all of that just kind of collapsed under us. And so we were refugees without having left our country, because East Germany was no more. But unlike most East Germans, Merkel was not going to be among the left behinds. She was so pent up with ambition and thwarted plans, because she had, it turns out, chosen science as a more or less safe place to park her brain, because science was tougher to tamper with, even for the Stasi, than certainly politics or humanities. So that was really a sanctuary for her whilst waiting for better days. And now suddenly, boom, her moment arrived, and she was not going to waste her shot, as Hamilton said. She went for it, and that too is characteristic of how she operates. She's very cautious, but when things open up, she moves. Somebody's phone. I'm glad it's not mine.
Yeah, sadly it's mine.
Well, that reminds me that I should.
All right.
I should check mine too. Roxanne, this happens at every event.
All right.
Don't feel bad.
Sorry to everybody. Okay, the phone's off.
Yeah.
The thing that was striking to me as I was reading about it, so she's in this cabinet.
Yes.
And I think this is the beginning, as I started to read, of understanding how adept she was at managing men. So
yes.
Helmut Kohl was a good old boy, right?
Well,
he was in the Bill Clinton. Maybe he was pals with.
Oh,
he was.
Yes,
of course they were.
Their epic dining out in Washington. I recall I was a young reporter at the time covering Clinton and Kohl, and when they were buddies, and they really were kind of well matched.
Of an ilk.
Yes, and both. Well, Bill Clinton no longer has this gargantuan appetite for pasta, but Kohl was. But in addition to being a man of large appetites, he was the titanic figure of German politics, responsible for the unification, along with Jim Baker and Bush the Elder. He was a huge figure in Germany, and he had chosen her. As
and what do you think? Was he attracted to the idea that she was representative of the unification? She was East German. Do you think he had any sense of her ambition?
Not at all.
He called her like my little girl, or
Mädchen. Yeah, very, very sanctimonious.
Yeah.
And you know what? This foreshadowed powerful men always underestimating her, which was one of her superpowers, is that she allows men to underestimate her. Recently, a very powerful figure who I will not name, but who would be known to you, said to me, "Congratulations, Kati, for reframing the drab Mutti," that means mommy in German, and making her seem so interesting. And I said to this gentleman, you're mistaken. I didn't reframe her. I unmasked her.
Yes.
But she was
Because
never.
there it was.
She was never what they assumed her to be, because quite deliberately she didn't want to call attention to herself, and she understood. Her ego is so under control. Boy, I've learned so much from observing her, that you can get a whole lot more done if you're not always taking credit for it, if you,
Yeah.
in fact, do it quietly and sideways as opposed to frontally.
But you know, the thing that I'll get to after we come up with we go through some of the examples, is the question that it raised for me is whether that is the style we demand of a woman, to allow her, I'm using
yes,
air quotes,
I understand.
to allow her to be successful, or in fact is what we're witnessing is that those are the qualities in a man or a woman that contribute to enormous, stable, political success, because we've seen the role of swagger. I mean, I think you have a quote somewhere in here from someone that, maybe it's from Socrates, that you quote about never let your hate for an enemy interfere in your judgment.
Right. Yes, it is from Socrates. Yes.
And, you know,
Yeah.
she understood that.
No, it's
I
from
think
The
most
Godfather. It's from The Godfather.
Oh, it's Michael Corleone.
Socrates, Godfather.
Socrates,
Yeah,
Michael
what's the
Corleone.
diff?
What the hell? That's right. It's Michael Corleone.
It's Corleone. Yeah, I go high and I go low. There is a Socrates quote in there.
I think in that chapter at the top you have a Socrates quote,
yes.
and then it's Michael.
Glad we sorted that out. Yeah. Don't let your anger cloud your judgment, and she certainly doesn't. You know, I mentioned in passing that her ego is under control. She has a very robust ego. I mean, nobody becomes chancellor of the powerhouse of Europe, Germany, if they don't have a big ego and if they don't think they can handle the job. And she has to be aware of the fact that she has a photographic memory, that she was always the smartest kid in the class, and that she knows how to bide her time. She has self-control, which I have to say very few male politicians, most politicians are male, have that level of self-control and the ability to just to sit on things as opposed to erupting, because she does not identify herself with her role. She has a very strong sense of who she is, and has always had a separate life from her political life, which I think is really key to the fact that for 16 years she's had the crushing burden of this office, and yet she seems fine. I mean, she is a woman of a certain age who can get off the flight from Beijing, which she frequently does, and go straight to the chancellery, a woman mid-60s who's carried on. And partly it's because she hasn't let the office define her and consume her. And this is such an important lesson for not just for politicians, but for anybody who has ambition to have a big job, is, don't be swallowed whole by the job. Keep something to yourself. And she's been masterful at keeping a separate...
But, Kati, here's the thing that it makes me think about, and not merely as a matter of semantics. Right. You would assume that someone who was as ambitious as she is has an ego. But the other defining quality of her is her humility. I mean, she, throughout her chancellordom, is living in a rent-controlled
same apartment
apartment in a pre-war building, which isn't the same thing as a pre-war building in New York, where it's some fancy thing. It's sort of a communist
You're right. Yeah,
ilky,
no doorman at this
no
building.
no doorman, and she stays there.
Yeah,
She stays there
yeah.
the whole time. So an ego would have wanted
The
more of the
trappings.
trappings.
She sees those trappings as, well, traps, things that would just slow you down. It's impossible to imagine her as the chatelaine of a big mansion of the sort that Putin acquires, or Trump, or any of them really. She thinks that the less you own, the less weighed down you are. Even in the last year, when she was, like all of us, doing a lot of Zoom calls from home, and she never, unlike most of us who
No
revealed
background.
what we're reading and our flowers and stuff,
Nothing.
nothing, a blank wall, because she just separates the office from the life. And I think, again, a big lesson about, keep yourself to yourself.
So you had something here that, so it's in June of 2005, right? She's running, well, I guess you don't run to be the chancellor. You're
Yeah,
party,
it's
and then you're picked. It's
right.
a different system.
It is the most Byzantine coalition federal system, by the way, constructed by ourselves, the
Post-war.
the victors in the war, and we wanted the new federal republic to be for power to be as diffuse as possible,
Right.
to prevent any Hitler ever again rising to the fore. But it makes German politics almost beyond description complicated.
But here's something that was interesting. You talk about in June of 2005, she approaches Tony Blair,
Yes.
who is
Yes.
in Berlin for a visit. And
Right.
I'm quoting your book, which is
Yes.
quoting her.
Right.
I have the following problem,
Yes.
says she. I am a woman. I have no charisma, and I am not good at communicating.
Yeah.
And she wanted his advice about how to compensate for those deficits. And an aide of Tony Blair said at the same time, she was obviously confident she could win.
Yes.
But here she lets down her guard,
Yes.
or I don't know.
Yes. Well, she's aware of her deficits, because she is as clear-eyed about her strengths as she is about her deficits. And again, because she knows her own, she's without illusions about herself. That too has enabled her to call on people who would fill in gaps in her own in her own character.
That
So
she was just
never
objective oriented.
very much so. Yeah, she was as objective about herself as, she's a trained scientist, so she analyzes herself and and any given situation, and very rarely does she act on impulse. One of her mantras is the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. So she really, like a good scientist, she really weighs the evidence. And of course, in the kind of complex world that we now live in, particularly in the time of COVID, that has proved to be a tremendous advantage, because she's not afraid of numbers. She's not afraid of technology. She's
Reports.
very tech wise, despite the fact that she doesn't do social media. She was among
Or
the
emails.
Nope, and she only tweeted. She only accessed Twitter because during her 4 toughest years, the 4 years of Trump,
To see what he was saying.
She had to, because that was the only place where he expressed himself, and so she relinquished her taboo on Twitter and followed him on Twitter. But she was among the first to signal the tremendous power and danger of social media. She put that right up there with, nuclear weapons as a danger for society.
So one of the seemingly first public indications that she might be viewed as ruthless
Yes.
was her mentor, the
Yeah, she
man
threw him
who
over.
she
Yeah.
threw him over.
Yep, she did. She did. She is, again. Here's a trait. Not to be sexist, but women are supposed to be somewhat sentimental, emotional. Boy, oh boy.
She's a scientist.
Yeah, she's unsentimental. When Cole, her mentor, who really was responsible for her ascent in German politics, was caught in a scandal, and no one else in the hierarchy of the Christian Democratic Union, her party, had the courage to say, "Thank you very much.
We got to move on here.
Yeah, she was the only one, and she did it so with such speed and really ruthless is the word. She wrote a front page opinion piece for the biggest German paper saying it's time to go, Helmut. It's time to go, and of course. That cleared her passage
And
to the chancellor.
unexpected. People did
she
not
didn't give
nobody had warned.
No heads up, and that's the another characteristic of hers is that she doesn't signal her moves. She just she's cautious. One of the stories that her friends love to tell from her childhood is Angela, teenage Angela, or 11-year-old, on the diving board, on the high dive.
Oh, right.
Walking up and down the high dive, and until the final minute, looking down and seeing, yikes, it's a long way down, until the whistle was blown by the gym teacher, and that it was over, and then she plunged. So that's often the case with her. She waits. She there's even a German word called Merkeling, which means putting off a decision until the last.
You have to.
Yeah.
So what I want to cover is I want to cover her relationship with three presidents, Bush 1, Bush 2, and Obama, and talk a little bit about that. And then I want to talk about her relationship with Putin, and particularly talk about their meetings at the time of the invasion of Crimea and the Ukraine. But she and George W. I mean, she had great affection for George W.'s
He was
father.
her hero. The elder Bush's portrait was in her office. So, he was.
And
he
his
was one
style was proximate to her.
Right. But she has a reverence for the United States, or did until quite recently, and we'll get to her shock at recent events here. But Bush, the elder, and Reagan were her heroes, were her Cold War heroes. And I have a description of a man who was present, the American ambassador to Germany at the time, Robert Kimmitt, when she met Reagan and then met Bush the elder, and her starry-eyed speechlessness. But the surprise for me was that the chemistry between Bush the younger, so W, and Merkel was very
immediate, right?
Yeah, they really liked each other, and she found him to be an authentic man, and also they're both people of faith. Her faith, her Lutheran faith, is something that she is extraordinarily private about. She doesn't think it's our business to know what her faith is, but
it's defining for her.
It's more a question of morality and responsibility toward others than she has. I mean, I quote her in trying to describe that she has ambivalence about God and so on, but she has no ambivalence about that here on earth our duty is to do the daily work of salvation. She often refers to the fact that for her, Sisyphus rolling that giant rock up the mountain, it is not a pessimistic image.
He's doing his job.
Even though the rock keeps falling on his head, that is, I mean, it's so
he
revealing.
Persists.
Yes, he persists. So I would characterize her as a determined optimist, not an optimist per se, but nor is she Henry Kissinger. She nor is she Barack Obama, who believes that the arc of the moral universe bends toward
She
justice.
doesn't think so.
No.
But speaking of Obama, so at first her take on him was not so great.
No.
He was the talking
All talk.
charmer, the hope, and
She was suspicious of him.
suspicious of him. She came to have respect for him after he passed the Affordable Care Act. But one of the things that I don't think I quite understood was one of the criticisms of Obama was him drawing a line
Yes, in
about
Syria.
Syria's use
Yes.
of gas.
Yes.
And then when he crossed that line, his staff, Susan Rice, a number of others, were sure that the United States, needed to prove that you don't cross the line and then not be accountable.
Yes, Hillary and Samantha Power, and they were all in favor of because Obama had stated that that was a red line and that we would.
But it was
and Assad
Merkel
crossed.
who convinced him not to. And in describing that, Kati, also talk about Angela's aversion to the use of military in any way.
Yes.
Because I think we again see that when we get to the Ukraine, which I do want to get to. But
Yes.
talk about that and the influence on Obama.
Yes. Well, Obama, Ben Rhodes, whom I spent a long time talking to, a key aide to Obama, of course, said that Obama's relationship to Merkel was as close to love as he had with any. And the closest the relationship with any foreign leader. That love was accompanied by tremendous respect. I have one chapter entitled "Get Me Angela on the Phone," which is a line frequently heard in the White House from Obama. According to Ben Rhodes, when he wanted to know pretty much anything about anything, he would turn to Merkel. So tremendous respect, and therefore wanted her support in Syria. But she's opposed to use of arms. She does not believe that military intervention
Ever
works. It's not to say that she's a pacifist, but given Germany's terrible history of having started 2 world wars and the Holocaust, she has good reason to be wary. Plus, which she is a child not of the Second World War so much as the Cold War, and the Cold War ended without weapons being fired. I mean, here and there they were, but
it was
the tanks,
astonishing.
and so that is kind of her a prototype for resolving conflicts, not moving arms. And then of course there was the fiasco of Iraq, which
Further fueling her bleed.
Yes, her. So when Obama declared with great fanfare that Assad must go as a precondition for negotiation, she was quite horrified that you don't make a precondition for negotiation, because that guaranteed that this ruthless dictator would fight to the last Syrian to hold on to power. And so she didn't think that was.
Do you think she regrets that stance?
No, because she does not believe that U.S. engagement in the Middle East with arms ever leads to anything good. It didn't really work out in either Afghanistan or Iraq. So no, I don't think she regrets that. I think what she does regret, and I'm sure we're about to get to that, is how little support she got from Obama and the rest of the Western allies when these wars that Germany did not start begot the greatest human migration since the Second World War, and then suddenly nobody was interested in helping them, and that's when she really came into her own.
Because I was struck by the juxtaposition of two seemingly contrary positions that she took. During the 2008 crisis, when Germany had very carefully accumulated a surplus.
Yes.
And therefore was not as undermined financially as most countries were, obviously, including the United States.
Absolutely.
And Greece was a member of the EU, and they were, flagrant in their not being compliant with the tax system and corruption and all of that.
But not the Greek people. It was their government, really, that lied to the people. Yes, I mean, you're quite right.
But the Greek people didn't see it that way.
No.
The Greek people saw her as this kind of
she
inhuman,
was,
unsympathetic. And then juxtapose that with her willingness at great political odds, and probably to the rise of the alternative
the far
party,
right.
The right that's now emerging, took a highly humane view to allow 1 million migrants. So juxtapose for us how both of those represented elements of who she was.
Yeah,
because they're at odds.
Absolutely, but she's a complicated person, and that's what makes her so interesting. She's not all humanitarian, and she's not all pragmatic either.
It's the downside of her pragmatism.
Yes, the financial crisis of 2008 revealed a rather unattractive side to her, where she was highly rational, and rigid in her imposition of austerity. Germany was Europe's banker, and as you said, in a far better position financially than anybody else. And she was preaching austerity to countries that were, on their knees. And not only Greece, but Greece the most vivid example. And
Italy
she was
also, right?
Yes, and Portugal and Spain and even Ireland. And she was suddenly depicted with a Hitler mustache and burnt in effigy.
And burnt.
Yeah, and that was a shock to her, of course. And she, even though she did ultimately favor bailing out Greece several times over,
but then they weren't going to forgive her.
She lost the PR war there. But this is a woman who's constantly learning from her own experiences and mistakes. And what she learned in 2008 was that, first of all, you have to factor in the irrational element in human decision making. She's such a hyper rational creature that she sometimes forgets that not everybody
operates that way.
Yeah, we're not all scientists. So when
did that experience inform her treatment of the refugees?
Absolutely. But there was something else, Roxanne, and she had a very personal encounter with a refugee girl. And
with a town hall, right?
Yes. And it's a very dramatic moment, and I would say it's the climax of my book. I mean, it's not near the end of the book because it's 2015, but in point of fact, that encounter with a refugee girl who started weeping on camera in front of the Chancellor, and the Chancellor whispered a single word into her microphone. The mic picked that up. God. And you could see that she was shaken to the core. And subsequently, she invited the little girl to the Chancellery. Typically for Merkel, no cameras, no publicity about the fact that that
PR,
little girl. No, she doesn't milk these situations for PR. She would look down on that. But that was the summer of the great migration from the Middle East, escaping the civil war in Syria, and most European countries were busy erecting barriers against them or treating them horribly, like Hungary,
Yeah.
and she, with incredible courage, said, "Wir schaffen das," which means we can handle this. Very flat assertion, typically undramatic. And it kind of took the drama out of it for her country, and her people
And for a long
followed
time,
her. Yeah, they lined up on train stations to welcome these poor bedraggled souls that had been kicked out of several other countries en route. And Germans really enjoyed and continue to being on the right side of history for a change, and have coped with it. It's not a front burner issue anymore. Those 1 million Middle Eastern refugees have been largely assimilated, and that is her permanent credit and legacy.
and I think people, you talk about a couple of the incidences of violence that
Yes.
that became fuel for those who were anti her doing it. But to a large degree, she required them to learn German.
Yes.
That they had to go where Germany told them, where jobs were
Yes.
needed to
Yes.
be filled. Germany's population was older. These refugees were younger, and to a large measure,
Yep.
they have been absorbed. And I think
Yep.
until I read the book, I don't know that I had quite registered, because I too read the headlines, right? That
Yes,
this happened and
of
that
course.
happened, and
Yeah.
but what I want to make sure we get to, because we only even have 15 minutes, which seems crazy. I want
Yes,
to make
and we
sure.
have much to get through.
I know. I want to cover two things. I want to end and talk about her legacy, and make sure that we leave some time for that. But I was just dumbfounded by her relationship with Putin. And I want to set the stage with the picture that you have on the chapter labeled Dictators of Angela, like looking in what I might call light disgust
Yeah.
at Putin. And Putin is doing his KBG stare
Yes.
down
Right.
at
right.
her.
Yes.
And yet
Mm.
they spoke frequently. And I want to
the time.
talk about this incident. So Putin, although he denies it, he sends his plainclothesmen, other military uniform people
Little
into the
green men.
Ukraine. Yeah,
Yeah.
little green men into the Ukraine. And, he's denying everything. He said, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And Obama sends Angela to deal with him, because
Yeah,
he
couldn't-
didn't like dealing
he
with him.
couldn't. He said, "I can't." He's yours. He's yours.
And
Yeah.
Putin had begrudging respect for Angela. But they ultimately, literally, sit down, you describe, for 15-hour
yeah.
days
Yeah.
going over maps.
Yes, which she had. This is her.
I mean, describe this.
yes,
It's just
yeah.
crazy to me.
Yeah, this is when she became not just the chancellor of Europe, but of the world, really, because Obama passed the baton on to her in the first invasion of another country since World War II in Europe. That is,
Yeah.
leaving aside the Balkan Wars, which were more internal, and because Obama just didn't have the patience. He's not, by Merkel standards, he's not a great negotiator. She will stay at that table till the cows come home. I have a quote from her saying that the only way she could tell the time of day was whether they were serving bread and jam or a roast. So her focus is absolute when she's negotiating, and she says that she's like a camel. She can store up sleep and go for days without it, and then collapses when it's over. So she really blocked Putin's further expansion, and not only that, she further
I mean, they sat
expansion
at a
into.
table.
Yes, and everybody else was falling asleep, including
The French minister,
yeah,
right? Somebody else.
yeah,
And they're there working.
yes,
Although
yes.
Putin sometimes sent in some,
A really rough guy. Yeah,
who was the bad guy.
the bad cop. Yeah, but her relationship with Putin is so interesting, and they have such a clear understanding of each other because they're both products of the same foundation, the same
Sure.
totalitarian Soviet-based
And in fact,
foundation.
Putin was in
Germany.
Germany
Yeah.
when the wall came down
Yes.
and left in some like tin can car.
Tin can carrying a used washing machine in the back. Yeah, for Putin, that was the great tragedy of his life and of the 20th century, the demise of the Soviet Empire. For Merkel, on the other hand, that was her rebirth as
But it
a
meant
new
they
person.
had that common experience.
They did. Plus, they literally speak each other's languages. So she's fluent in Russian because you had to learn that as a child growing
And he's
up.
fluent in
And
German.
yeah. And I asked her not long ago, which language do you now speak with Putin? Because he's the only one she's the only one that he really respects and speaks to, who isn't beholden to him because he likes to talk to people who are lesser than him. But with Merkel, yeah, so she answered, well, these days we rapidly switch. I start off speaking to him in Russian, and we rapidly switch to German because his German is better than my Russian now. But they know each other perfectly. He tried his damnedest to shake her composure by the KGB staring test, unleashing his
Dog in a meeting.
Yeah, because he knows that she's afraid of dogs, having twice been bitten. Nothing works. And she is unshakable because we spoke earlier of how she observed men, macho men particularly.
Alpha males,
peacocks, and she's just not that impressed by them. And this of course would drive Trump crazy as well because she doesn't react.
Because they need that.
Yeah.
They need the...
Yeah. When Trump fished out a couple of Starburst candies
and
from his
threw
pocket,
them at her,
yeah,
right?
And said at a G20 meeting, a sort they're having right now, and said, Angela, don't say I never gave you anything. She didn't even react.
Yeah.
The others around that conference table were just appalled. Angela, complete control, but her eyes are so expressive, and that photograph that you referred
on the
to,
cover is brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. But she rolls her eyes when he's mansplaining to her, and or when Trump is, for that matter. I mean, that is her one. But then when the meeting is over, she'll go to her staff, and they've reenacted for me how she's got a really good little takeoff on that. It would go very well on Saturday Night Live on Putin all riled up, doing his little dance. And she's a good mimic. She's by the
funny,
way,
right? She's funny,
hilariously funny.
Yeah,
Very
but you would
very
never
dry.
know.
Very no, because again, she doesn't want us to know that because that doesn't belong on her public side. I think it's unfortunate. I think she often misses opportunities to connect to people but it's the combination of 35 years in the surveillance state and the Lutheran background.
And a scientist.
And by the way, okay, so she's not winning any world charm contest, but she is the world's most respected leader and no lame duck. I mean, she has left
it's crazy.
the office without anybody breathing a huge sigh of relief. On the contrary, there is serious concern as to who now will lead the West. And I don't see too many.
You talk about a worry that you analogize to 1933 when there was somewhat of a void. But what I want to get to is, so one of the things that she's been very criticized for recently by the U.S., by the EU, is allowing the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. So she understands who she's dealing with Putin. This is
Absolutely.
certainly at odds with giving them any kind of giving Russia any kind of economic stability. The EU is opposed to it. But this
Yep.
tiptoes into the notion of legacy, and that
Yep.
is she shut down the nuclear plants after
Fukushima.
Fukushima. She couldn't make a fast enough pivot to alternative energy. They therefore had extraordinary energy costs that were
Right.
going to undermine the economy. So she made the pragmatic decision that this was good for Germany, if
Yes.
bad for Europe.
Well, it was a pragmatic choice. And again, going back to her mantra about the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, she's a non-ideological, non-dogmatic person. And in this instance, I mean, I criticize her for this. Because you're keeping Europe strong and united is her vision, especially now that the United States is no longer such a reliable senior partner. But here she chose German interests, and partly it comes from the fact that she's so aware of Germans' history and the fact that this is a country that she does not want to test under economic duress. She feels that this is a country that has revealed susceptibility.
And she
When
understands the role of fear.
Oh boy, yes, she sure
Right.
does. So she opted for the German interest in this instance, and she can be faulted for that, but she does not want the German economy to tank, because of her ideals. She's, again, to emphasize, she's pragmatic, but she's a pragmatic decision maker with a moral center that she never abandoned. But it's a
I
tightrope.
was just going to say, I was just going to
Whoa,
use the word.
it's a
That's a
tightrope.
tightrope because as I read the book and I understood, you wouldn't call it contradictory
Not
because it's
no.
not, it's of a
Yeah.
whole of
Yeah,
her
it's a
persona.
balancing act. And so with China too, she's been going to China more than any other head of state since 2005. She's gone every year, and she sees what's going on in China. She's not wide-eyed about the crackdown on the Uyghurs and on Xi Jinping's messianic dreams, but she thinks that China has to be engaged, and that China was once upon a time a great cultural and economic leader in the world, and then fell upon on hard times. And it has a place at the table, and we have to deal with it. And we can't, because she avoids bombast and easy formulas. She rejects ever saying to somebody like Xi Jinping, in front of the cameras, that this is unacceptable.
That's not her style.
But her aides assure me that once they are behind closed doors, she does tell him that you're forcing us to retrench. This is not in your interest. But she would never. She's never taken on either Putin or back in the day Trump in front of the
Publicly.
cameras. She thinks that's cheap and has the opposite of the desired effect. It's all theater. It's to puff up
Her
the little,
position at
yeah,
their cost.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
she knows that won't move the needle. That
And
won't
that's what she.
push. That won't push that
Yeah,
rock up the hill.
but no, but she is. I don't depict her as a perfect
No.
anything, but she is just vastly more interesting than is the common image, and even Germans don't know how interesting she is. I hope that when they read my book, they'll discover that she's vastly more interesting than they've been led to believe. But she, I once asked her if she read the books written about her, and she said yes, but I don't recognize myself in any of them. And I'm kind of hoping that she will recognize
This is not
herself.
authorized. She
No,
did
no,
not
no, it's
speak
not.
to you.
No,
But she
we
knew
had
you were writing it.
yes, and she allowed me to observe her at work, and she allowed me to spend a great deal of time with members of her inner circle, which was
That's
actually
unusual.
much more valuable than a sit down with Angela Merkel would get me zero point zero information
Information.
because she's so controlling of information. But to actually observe her
Sure.
and also I did just scores of interviews with people who've known her their entire lives, and friends, teachers,
Yeah, there's some
schoolmates.
interesting. So, Kati, we've got 2 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
This goes fast.
I know.
Roxanne.
So, obviously, we didn't get to a gazillion questions or
Yes.
chapters,
Yes.
and I do hope our listeners will read the book because there's so much to learn about history, about her, about
Thank you.
how we're positioned politically. But what I'd like your thoughts on is her legacy. On the one hand, her legacy of the condition in which Germany is, and
Yes.
maybe the fault lines that are beginning to show with the advance, maybe because of immigration of the right.
Yeah.
The EU is weakened.
Well, let me just say, since we have so little time, that she's transformed the country. I mean, there's no disputing that. It is a much more open and tolerant country, and
More liberal.
and more, yes, toward women, toward she made marriage equality the law of the land. All this as head of the Christian Democratic Union. She opened up space for women. She did all this as a stealth politician. With that, I don't think she ever gave a single speech about women, but she made it happen.
Right.
And she made a multi-ethnic culture a reality. There's no going back on that. But I think that most of all, what she has done is put to rest forever the notion that that a woman of how a woman leader leads, because the things that she achieved, the ego-free politics, and the fact that her focus was on her people, not on herself. I don't think that those achievements are in spite of the fact that she's a woman. I attribute them to the fact that she is a woman, and I think it's a new image, a new definition of a powerful woman leader that we can all learn from.
So, Kati, do you hope or believe that her leadership, so she's been in politics now since 1990, she was chancellor since 2005, do you think that there are women leaders in the world that now look to that model as a potential recipe for success, that
Absolutely.
that woman doesn't need to become an alpha, female male?
Absolutely, because it's a formula for success.
Yeah.
Because if this
And
can,
do you think
if this can
people
work,
understand that? I mean, hopefully they'll read this book and they'll understand
Yes,
it.
I'm very much hoping. Yes, it's been translated into 15 languages. So
Is that right?
Yes, that's a first for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that the most of any
Yes,
of your
definitely.
books?
I've had 3 or 4 languages, but 15, no. And so this is an international book. It's not principally for German political wonks. It's not an academic book. It's not a.
It's actually quite riveting.
Thank you. I was hoping you'd say that.
I found myself just because it's a history of the world, of world politics in the last 20 something years. I mean, it as a reader, it makes me worry about Germany. Is she leaving a power void?
No, she's not.
Oh,
She's
good.
not. She's not. And I would say that Germany will be the last country to succumb to populism, because it
Oh, you're
has done.
cheering me up,
Oh yeah,
Kati.
yeah. No, the AfD, the far right party in the Bundestag, polls support is dropping for them. I think COVID revealed the need for actual competent leadership. When there's a crisis, you don't just want hot air. You want people who know what they're doing.
Yeah,
And so
and they
their support.
understand that.
And so the support for the AfD is very low, mostly from East Germany, and that again speaks to the incomplete fusion of East and West.
Yeah, and you
And
talk
I
about
fault
that.
her for not spending enough time
Showing
bringing.
up,
Yes, yes,
understanding.
yes, yes. These people wanted to be acknowledged. It's not the economy, stupid. It's because the Germans continue to pay solidarity tax to their East German
Not
neighbors.
unlike how the Democratic Party has been criticized for not understanding how the
Absolutely.
middle class
Uh,
was
the-
not able to keep up
Yes,
over
the
the
so-called
last.
left behinds.
Yeah.
But it's a global discontent
Right.
with those who have done well as opposed to those who have not, and who are living in gutted cities, neglected, whose kids have moved out, and we saw some of them storming the Capitol on January 6th. They were, for the most part, they were older people, actually.
And
not-
so let me ask you
Yeah.
two questions as a close, because we could probably go on for another
I sure could.
hour. But when you set out to write this book,
Mm.
what did you hope the outcome would be? And more speculatively, we know that Angela Merkel reads books about herself. What do you think, or what do you hope her reaction to the book would be?
Well, I set out. I started in 2015 on this project because I was so astonished that she accepted all these Middle Eastern refugees at a time when everybody was telling her that therein
That'd be the
lies.
death of her.
Yeah, people like Kissinger and other Republican wise men, and it hasn't come to pass. And I wanted to know who she really was. I had met her in 2001. We had a dinner. And again, I don't know if we have time for this, but this was very revealing of her. She wanted to meet my late husband, Richard Holbrooke, because he had successfully negotiated the end to the war in Bosnia, and she was in those days a minister, but she's always interested in learning from people who are good at whatever they do.
And Richard Holbrooke had been an ambassador to
Yes.
Germany before Angela.
Right.
Right.
Yes, during the Clinton years. Yeah.
I'm
So
calling her Angela.
yes, I'm sure.
Oh,
she would-
whatever.
I'm sure she wouldn't mind. She'd call you Roxanne. And it was it was typical of her that she would ask to have a meeting with Richard Holbrooke, and that was my first to learn from him. As luck had it, the fourth person at that dinner was Susan Sontag, and Susan Sontag did all the talking. But I got to observe, no surprise there, but I observed the politician Angela Merkel, in those days a minister, in active listening mode. And you could just see that this is a person who wasn't at that dinner to make an impression. She was at that dinner to absorb. And I just thought, wow, that is so rare in a
And
politician.
the most defining quality, I think, of her,
yes.
that her capacity and curiosity and dedication
Yes.
to learning, even if it were a passing conversation.
She's still doing that. The last time I was in the Chancellery, she was reading books on quantum computing. I mean, for pleasure. So
Why not?
we need serious public servants, not people who are busy telling us that our neighbor is out to get us.
So, Kati, we've used up 2 excess times,
Oh,
and we still haven't gotten to everything,
but a lot. But we covered a lot.
we
of
covered
it.
a
Yeah.
lot, and there's more in the book that I mean, I think what you do in the book, which was helpful and made it fun for me, is there are details about history, and there's details about her, and there's details about relationships, and there's details about people still on the world stage.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Well,
we didn't even talk about her relationship with Macron. So,
yes,
but
that's
people will have to
yeah,
read it. We
they
can't get
will,
to it.
because that's an interesting and another complicated relationship, the Macron Merkel duo.
Yeah.
A study in contrast.
So we've been talking to Kati Marton, the author of The Chancellor, of the remarkable odyssey of Angela Merkel. Kati, always so much fun.
Thank you so much
to
for
have a
having me.
conversation. And
Thank you.
for this book. People ought to buy it just for the picture of Angela on the
It's a good one, isn't it? Yeah, that arresting, icy blue gaze.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
that
But thank you for
follows
your
you.
time, and thank you for the book.
I thank you. I thank you, Roxanne.